Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with the Lip, and I am here with something awesome for you. Gotta tell you right up front, I want to get carrier Philippine battles to the table for you all, but it's kicking my butt. So as I'm still learning that one, it's still on the table, still being done. I was like, all right, let me get something else up real quick. Let me work on something light while I'm working on the heavy one in the back scenes, right? And this one came in a little bit ago, and it fits perfect with the theme of carrier, what I'm already doing. Not to mention it's got a scenario that's going to work well. It's got solo, it's got carriers, it's got planes, it's good stuff. So we're going to be taking a look at Fighters of the Pacific. And what is really awesome is in it was talking about fighters of Europe. They were going to have this up sooner, and it got pushed back. It's actually launching in April. So Fighters of Europe hasn't launched yet, and Fighters of the Pacific is one that sadly I missed the Kickstarter. I kicked myself because this game is really cool. It's really neat. It's a game where the planes are represented by tokens. The carriers and the destroyers represented by tokens. There's no dice in it. Nothing big you got to worry about. It just plays, right? You just play the game. You try to get your planes in a good line of fire. There's altitude you have to worry about. You got bombs. You got torpedoes. You got the whole nine. You can sink carriers. You can do the whole thing, but you're not swamped with rules. The rule book is what? 4 pages, something like that. Yeah, it's like 7 pages, but even the rules aren't even all that much. The back of it's pretty much a reference sheet. First couple of pages are just what comes in the game. So it's like 4 or 5 pages of actual rules. It's really not that much. Real easy to get to the table. Looking forward to trying this. So what I've done is I've set up a scenario. I'm actually doing the 10th scenario, the final one that's in the book, because it is set up similar to how carrier plays, in the fact that you have a carrier, you have planes in your hangar deck, you have to launch them. You have so many planes that you get to use. So you have that whole carrier experience, right? Where you're doing it, right? You got your planes, you're launching them, you're trying to fire torpedoes and bombs at the carrier while your fighters protect your carrier, and you're trying to take out the enemy carrier. So I'm going to have the AI system run the Japanese carrier, and I'm going to run the American carrier, the Enterprise. But I've got a couple of surprises set up. I've done something a little special for this game that changes it just a little bit, makes it look a little bit cooler there on the board. But let's go down to the table so you guys can see it all set up. All right, so here we are down at the table. I'm real zoomed back right now so you guys can kind of get a full bird's eye view, but we're going to bring it down in when we start getting our battle kicked off. I'm going to give you just a quick heads up overview of the game, the components, and then we're going to just jump right into the scenario. Now, here's our scenario booklet, which is like 2-3 times the size of the rule book. I'm telling you, there's really no hard rules to this game. We are doing this one, scenario 10, face to face, because most of the scenarios, right, have stuff like this where it's set up and the planes are already on the board, or they're coming in waves afterwards as like reinforcements. Okay, this one is actually set up kind of like carrier, the Philippine battles. So just this half of it, you see there's an American carrier here, a little destroyer, some little cloud cover and the like. But over here, it shows a recon group, flight deck, and hangar. So these are sections that you're supposed to use laid out on the board or next to the board so you can keep track of what planes are where. For me, I'm just going to do that off. That way I don't have to have this laying out. But you see listed here are our forces, right? So we've got Force 1, the Enterprise, Force 2, Hornet, plus destroyers, and then a selection of aircraft. They're going to be on it. So the Enterprise has the destroyer, which I'll show you the token there here in a sec, 9 F4F Wildcats, 5 TBD Devastators, I want to say Devastators, and 11 SBD Dauntless Dive Bombers. Really cool stuff. The Hornet is set up, I think, almost exactly the same or exactly the same. To save us a little time on the scenarios, since both sides have similar forces, the Japanese have 2 aircraft carriers, 2 destroyers, selection of planes. They have their Zeros, they have their Kates, they have their Vals. All right, so the dive bombers, the torpedo planes, and then their fighters. We're just going to go with one aircraft carrier for each side, 1 destroyer for each side, and the aircraft that come with them. I think I cut it down a little bit as far as the fighters and maybe some of the bombers were concerned, just not to take us forever doing it, but just 1 set of forces. So we're not going to have 2 sets of forces, but the goal is going to be take out the opponent's aircraft carrier and or destroy the most amount of planes. Just as an FYI, for this scenario, it talks about preparation, and this part is not solo conducive, so I'm having to house rule a couple of things. It talks about recon and picking out a number of planes and comparing it to how many your opponent picks out, and basically it simulates like a surprise attack. We're not going to worry about this. I'm going to do a simple D6 roll, and whoever wins the D6 roll, if I do, I get to start with 3 of my attack aircraft in the air. If they do, they get to start with 3 of their attack aircraft in the air, and we're just going to leave it at that since there's no way for me to simulate this aspect of the scenario doing it solitaire. But one of the cool, awesome things about this game is the fact that there is a solitaire mode for it, right? So in it, for initiative, for activation, the planes, they're going to be attack, offensive, defensive, whether or not they are a target or they have a target, it's going to affect their attitude, right? And then there's a little chart here that talks about their decisions. For the most part, this should work for us. I might have to make an off-the-cuff decision for them in case of, targeting my carrier over a certain plane or something like that, whatever's going to work best for them score-wise. But I think it even adjusts for that, like certain targets, right? It'll go after whatever the scenario thing is. But that is all listed down here. We're going to be using this during our little playthrough. Now, a cool part for this game is that we have a selection of different things that come with it. So aircraft carrier tokens, destroyer tokens, a wide variety of aircraft tokens, which, oh my God, I'm killing myself for missing this Kickstarter because there were bonuses and stuff you could have got that I didn't get because I didn't get the damn Kickstarter because I missed it. Oh, I hate myself sometimes. But you see our 0 tokens here. These are the fighters. They're a little bit smaller. I believe these were called the Kates, the torpedo bombers, right? And then we've got our Vals. They look similar, but you can easily tell them apart by looking at them. You can tell these bombers have that black line. They have a rear gunner. These guys do not, right? And they are double-sided. They are double-sided, the aircraft, because the blue side means they are at low altitude, and the cloud side means they are at high altitude. That's it. That's all you got to worry about when it comes to altitude. As far as the American aircraft go, we have a selection of these. These are the Dauntless, the dive bombers. No, that's a dive bomber. That is a torpedo bomber, and I don't have the Wildcats on this sheet. Here we go. And these are the Wildcats. Again, the smallest one is the fighter, and we see our other aircraft carrier. This one is the Hornet. But you'll notice that I don't have the other tokens on the board, and that's because I did something really cool. I went ahead and I actually printed a 3D print, and I adjusted the size to fit because the aircraft carrier is supposed to be 3 hexes. So I made the aircraft carriers 3 hexes. Now, I didn't have a file that would work for a Japanese carrier specifically. So what I did is I just printed off 2 of the same carrier, and I painted one in the scheme of a Japanese carrier. The red circle was free-handed. Don't hate me for having a crappy one. But ultimately, I think it came out pretty good. It did all right, right? Looks pretty decent, and they hold the tokens really well. So like the American aircraft carrier can have only 2 aircraft launched at a time. The Japanese, they can have 3 launched at a time. And let me move this out of the way. Boom. There we go. As you can see, if I put it on there, right? My little prints, they actually hold the aircraft really well. They fit right there on it. You have to move that one to the side a little bit because of the conning tower. But other than that, they work great. I think it looks so much cooler on the board. All right, so as far as the rest of the components of the game goes, I'm going to show those to you real quick. We have a sequence of play, player aid, gives you the little rundown of what happens when. This is for determining initiative. Since I'm doing this solo, I may or may not go exactly with this. I might simply just do a roll off. I'm not sure how well their initiative works with a solo with a bot, but we'll give it a chance. And then for determining who has the initiative, you can simply flick that token and then the bot attitude. So whether or not they're defensive or offensive, and we're going to start them offensive because they want to kill my carrier. We also have a couple of player aids. There's actually a handful of these that show the stats for the different aircraft. Now, one of the things that you'll notice you have not seen at all yet are dice, and you haven't heard me reference them very much, with the exception of the house rules that I've added in just to adjust for playing the solitaire. And that's because there are no dice. This game does not operate on them. When planes make an attack, they're simply doing that if they're in the line of fire. That's it. And if you are in the line of fire, you can make a dodge if you haven't been activated. If you dodge and you're not out of line of fire, you take damage. It's just that simple. If you take too much damage, whatever your armor rating is, you blow up and you die. Bam. It's just that simple. The little symbols here show where people can shoot. And you kind of see on it like, well, you know, they look very similar. And they are similar, but there are noticeable differences. All of the American aircraft have 2 armor, so basically 2 health. The Japanese ones do not. They are weaker. They also have the flammable stat, which makes them even weaker. So if they are directly in front of an aircraft, so at that specific hex, and they take damage, they take double damage because they're flammable. But our Zeros here, they have cannons. That's what that 20 millimeter gun there represents. And if you see, if they get someone in that hex, they do double damage. So they've got good power right up close. They'll blow you out. The American aircraft can take a little bit more damage, but they're not as agile, right? So the Val, the Kate here, the Val and the Zero are agile, not the Kate. And that agile ability gives them the ability to have one free 60-degree turn. So basically the hex, right? They can turn to a different hex facing, which is huge. However, in this game, when it comes to movement, you can't do quick zigs and zags. So basically, if you go on left, you can't go left, right, or up and down, like that. You have to kind of stick with what an aircraft could do. So other than our tokens for our ships, tokens for our planes, we have some simple damage tokens to represent damage on our ships and or planes. We have a torpedo token that is double-sided. The Japanese torpedo works a little better than the American torpedo, which was actually historically accurate. So if a Japanese drops a torpedo, it's going to move 2 hexes during the torpedo movement phase versus an American torpedo, which is slower, is only going to move 1. Bombs, there are tokens for those as well. All right. See that? But they're standard for each side. Doesn't matter. Bomb is a bomb. There are tokens as well for things like flak burst. We're not going to use that in our playthrough here just to keep things simple. There are AA, right? So as we're looking at ships, if you had let's say this was an island instead of a cloud, they could have a AA token on it, which means this could attack aircraft in that hex and then the 6 surrounding hexes. Ships are considered to have AA, so destroyers here and aircraft carriers can fire at enemy planes as they come in, but they only get to fire once. So AA can't sit there and just target everything that comes through. So for me, the way I would keep track of that is if the AA here on the back segment of the torpedo or the destroyer had fired, I would just put a little activated token on there to signify the fact that it's already fired. However, a ship can take damage, and this works for our aircraft carriers as well. So if they take damage, you'll mark off a segment. It's segment dependent, so first, second, third segments. The Japanese aircraft carrier can hold 3 in this scenario. Like I said, the Americans can only hold 2. And for each segment destroyed, you lose an aircraft, the ability to launch 1 aircraft. With the exception of the Americans, they don't lose an aircraft on the first damage. all right, since they can only launch 2 anyway. And again, you're going to lose the ability to shoot AA from whatever segment happens to get damaged. So if this back segment here of the carrier got destroyed, it would not be able to fire AA. And as an added detriment, if it is the back segment where the steering and engine are, they can't move anymore either because the ships can move. This one would no longer be able to move if it took a bomb hit or a torpedo hit back there. It'd be considered to be destroyed. You still need the 3 hits though to actually destroy the aircraft carrier, or 2 hits to destroy the destroyer. And just to show you very quickly, there is a segment of moves that aircraft can do. Not all aircraft can do all moves. Things like split S can only be done by aircraft that are agile or fighters. But advanced, simply moving 1 hex forward. Slide means you're moving up in a direction next to the hex that you're in, but you're still facing that same direction. Turn, you are turning into a new hex. Dive, you're going to change from the higher altitude, right? So white side down to the lower side, so the dark blue side. And you're going to move forward a hex while you do that. For climb, it is the reverse of a dive, but it's going to cost 2 movement points. See, dive only costs 0 because you are going down, right? So you're not going to lose movement points doing that. You are burning altitude to gain speed, to gain momentum. Here, they represent that by not charging you movement points. But if you want to reverse that and change it from low altitude to high altitude, it's going to cost you 2 movement points. And the split S, you can see you go from high altitude to a low altitude facing in any number of directions. Yep. And see here it is only available to airplanes with the fighter trait, and it's going to cost you all your movement points. Again, there are some restrictions. The movement in an airplane must follow these 4 rules. Use all of its movement points. Never perform a maneuver to the right, slide or turn. After a maneuver to the left, slide or turn. So you're not going to slide or turn this way and then immediately slide or turn this way. Never perform a climb and dive maneuvers in the same movement, and never end the movement on another airplane at the same altitude. So 1 unit per hex. All right, one last little addendum just to let you guys know. There are things called airplane groups. All right, so to be in an airplane group, they all have to be at the same altitude and they all have to be going in the same direction. See here, these Japanese fighters, they would actually constitute 2 groups, even though, they also have to be connected, all right? So they have to actually be touching each other. Even though all these airplanes are going in the same direction, right? And they're all touching, these 2 are at a separate altitude. They're at low altitude while these 3 are at high altitude. So when we're going back and forth doing activations, when the Japanese activate a airplane group, because you can activate either singles, right? So you can activate the lone one-off airplane, but generally you want to keep your aircraft together so you can activate them in larger groups. These 3 could be activated together as long as they hadn't already been activated, or these 2 could be activated together. And that's pretty much it. There are a few other basic rules to the game, nothing too fancy, but that's the gist. All right, so let's finish out this quick intro video with the start of the scenario we're going to play. We've got our Japanese carrier down here in the very bottom right. We've got our American carrier up there in the upper left. So let's figure out who's going to get the 3 starting aircraft. And for it, I think we'll go with bombers. Just for ease, should we go with bombers? Yeah, we'll go with bombers. So if it's the Japanese, they're going to get 3 VALs. And if it is my aircraft, it will be 3 SBDs. All right, so we'll do 1, 2, 3, me. 4, 5, 6 will be the Japanese. All right, so the Japanese are going to get it. I am going to start them with 3 aircraft over here. All right, so I'm going to be keeping track off screen, off camera, what is considered on the flight deck, what's in the hangar for both of these aircraft carriers. Now, the way the scenario rules state is that you can have as many aircraft as you want on your flight deck, but if your flight deck gets bombed, you lose all the aircraft that are on there. So that is something to be wary of. If you have a buttload of aircraft spread across your flight deck and you get bombed, you're going to lose all of them. Since the Japanese start with aircraft already in the air, to match things up, I am going to put a couple on my flight deck to start, and there's going to be one already on the flight deck. So these two are ready to launch during this turn, and there's another that's already there on the flight deck. Other than that, the rest of my aircraft are considered to be down in the hangar, and I can bring up one per round, one per turn. I can bring up one aircraft up to the flight deck. But remember, I can only launch 2 a turn. Okay, that's it, period, just 2 a turn. I can have as many as I want up on the flight deck, but if it gets hit, then it gets destroyed. Also, to help myself keep it in mind where they are, if they are on the flight deck getting ready to be launched, but they're not actually launched yet, I'm going to have them on their high altitude side to represent that. But then once they've actually launched, if they're up in the air, they'll be on the blue side to signify they're at whatever altitude. Hopefully that will work out, since more than likely they'll climb and kind of peel away in this direction and get up to altitude, right? So that should work out for to help me keep track of which ones are actually on the flight deck when they're here versus which ones are flying across the flight deck. And to even it out a little bit, since the Japanese, again, are starting with 3 aircraft up in the air, they've only got a single on their flight deck, and then after that, they're going to have to start bringing the rest of theirs up from the hangar to start to launch them. The 3 that they have up are these 3 valves, and you can see I've got bomb tokens on them to represent the fact that they do have their bombs. All right, so once they drop their bomb, then I'll take those tokens off. So during the course of the game, we'll do the initiative phase, then we'll do the activation where we go back and forth activating them. And then the end of the turn, things like these ships and torpedoes will move. We'll do like hangar stuff where ships will come up from the hangar, get ready to be launched and all that good stuff. But we're going to cut it here. You guys stay tuned. We will pick up with the start of action on the next turn, and we'll see if these Vals are able to bug their way over and maybe take out a destroyer or the aircraft carrier, God forbid, before I'm able to get up some defenses. All right, that's going to be it for me. You guys take care. I will catch you in the next one.